So here we are, billions of creatures, all thinking that we are the center of the universe. In a way we are. We create our universe through our own mental faculties. I'm not going to go into all of that, but if you read Schopenhauer or Kant or whatever, then you'll see that actually the universe you inhabit is the universe you create. And even the way you think is predetermined. It's a part of a structure of your consciousness, as is time and space. And so all this universe that you see disappears when you die, obviously, because then your brain isn't functioning, and so the simulation dies with you. Anyway, that isn't the main topic of this. The main topic is this thing of us all thinking that we are the center of the universe, and all of us being engaged in what can only be called a power game. Because every living creature thinks that it, above every other creature, has the right to survive and to thrive. And because of that, most creatures, human beings, animals, even trees, will fight for all they are worth to guarantee their survival. And for human beings, this takes on a particularly pathetic shape. We actually will fight for ideas and beliefs, not just physical survival. We will fight because we believe that our country or our political ideology or our religion is the right one and everybody else is wrong. They're power games. It doesn't really matter how you shape these power games. They are always in operation with every creature, and the result is endless suffering and endless conflict. So you might not think that you are involved in power games, but you are, unless you are a very, very, very rare individual, unless you are Buddha or Jesus Christ or something like that. So your power game may be that you think your way of life is right and everybody else is wrong. Your power game may be that you think you are stronger. So maybe you go and do weights and push people around at the local bar or whatever. Or maybe you think you are cleverer than everybody else. A very funny story there. Nassim Taleb, the guy who wrote The Black Swan, and if you haven't read Taleb, he's worth reading. Anyway, he wrote a number of books, very well-known figure these days. Very wealthy man because he found a way how to make money in the stock markets. He has no need to work, but actually he decided that he would go and be an academic. I think he lasted for about a year or two. He documented the hatred, the envy, the backbiting, the competition between these people, all wanting to get one up on all their peers. Very vicious environments, academic environments. Probably more vicious than commercial environments, in truth, and less honest as well. At least in a commercial environment, you know what everybody's after. They're after money. But in an academic environment, it's all disguised by polite smiles and sort of arguments that aren't meant to crush the opposition, but actually that's what they're really designed to do. Anyway, so you might think you're cleverer than everybody else. You might think you're more emotionally sensitive, that everybody else is a brute, and that you alone appreciate the fine spiritual things of life. And then we come to spiritual people who believe that everybody else is some lump of clay, and that they alone are tapping into something ethereal and higher than what the rest of us experience. So it doesn't really matter what your thing is. You will be in some way involved in some kind of power game, thinking that you are superior to everybody else because you believe you are the center of the universe. Now, Spinoza talks about something called the sovereign natural right. What he means by this is that we have been created like this. You didn't create yourself. You are The word created is, it's a bit of a loaded word, but you have effectively come into being the way you are, as do all creatures. And what is common amongst all creatures is that they will fight tooth and nail to survive and to dominate other creatures in some way or other. Thinking they're smarter, thinking they're more refined, whatever it is. And so we end up with endless conflict, huge amount of suffering. I've mentioned this statistic before, but it's a mind-boggling statistic. 127 million people died in the last century from revolutions, wars, other conflicts, mainly ideological, mainly one nation against another, one ideology against another. Totally meaningless, fruitless, but this is the way we operate. My ideas are better than your ideas are better than somebody else's ideas, so you'll go and fight and fucking kill them for it. So Spinoza talks about sovereign natural right, the power given to each creature, and in his understated way, he says, big fish eat little fish. Very strong muscular people might bully weak people. People with lots of money might exploit people who have no money and are desperate for some money, and so on and so forth. So we get these power games taking place, and if we behaved in the way that we had been created, without the application of any reason whatsoever, then basically it would be a free-for-all. One man raiding, his neighbour's house to get the 50-inch plasma TV or whatever, because he's bigger and stronger and he's got 2 guns. Men randomly raping women because typically men are physically stronger than women. Whatever. This is the way it would be. Sovereign natural right. And I have another video called "This is the way God planned it." This is the way God meant it to be. This is how we are created. This is how nature creates us. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that as reasonable creatures, we can say to ourselves, is this how we want to live our lives? So, to summarize that bit, our natural state is to beat the hell out of anybody else, intellectually, emotionally, physically, whatever way we can, to assert our dominance and to preserve our existence. That is the way we work. And that is the way every creature in nature works. We have near us, we have Spanish house sparrows. They're the most vicious little bastards you might ever wish to come across. They will compete for a nesting site, and in that competition they'll just literally pull the chicks out of a nest, peck them to death and drop them to the ground so that they can take over the nesting site, and so on and so forth. And so the dogs at this time of year, well, a little bit earlier than this, but also this time of year, love it, because there's lots of little chicks sort of flapping about on the ground, and they go and chew them up. Nature, beautiful, isn't it? So this is the natural state of things. So how do we make things better? How do we improve this state of things? Well, the key to it all is to create a state. And the only way we can create a state is if all the members of that state willingly agree to give up some of their power. This is what you have to do if you are going to live in an orderly state. If you would like to live in a chaotic, barbaric environment, then forego the state. And what we would end up with in that situation is the biggest brutes, the people with most guns or whatever, ruling the roost, and in the end they would fight it out between themselves anyway, so you'd be left with almost nothing. Total destruction. So we have to give up some of our sovereign natural right, as Spinoza calls it, to live in a state. And living in a state means that there are laws and we have to obey the laws and live by those laws, even though they constrain us. And there is an understanding, or should be an understanding, that there's a compromise to be reached between individual freedom and the order of society, so that we can all live a reasonable life. Now, this is normal life, you might say. On the one hand, brutes roaming around with no inhibitions whatsoever in a lawless society, or without any society at all, just the sovereign natural right, as Spinoza would call it. And as he says, nature does not frown on these things. Nature doesn't frown on us being aggressive and angry and so on and so forth. He says, from this it follows that nature's right and her established order, under which all men are born and for the most part live, forbids only those things that no one desires and no one can do. It does not frown on strife, hatred, anger, or deceit, or anything at all urged by appetite. Well, of course it doesn't, because appetites come from nature, so why is nature going to frown on those things? As far as Spinoza is concerned, right and wrong are defined by the state. They're not defined by nature. There is no inherent moral ground. So if you want to go and kill someone because they've got a nicer car than you, just another way of someone asserting their dominance, then nature does not frown on that at all, but society does. Society does, because if that was allowed, then basically there would be mayhem. And so society has to constrain our natural behavior, which, as Spinoza says, is basically hatred and anger and deceit and so on and so forth. Of course, our laws aren't completely useful in this respect, and in fact, if you are wealthy, then you can buy very good lawyers and you can get away with legalized fraud or legalized deceit. But that's another story. So, there we have it. Two alternatives. One is completely lawless environment, but where we can do whatever the fuck we want. Our natural sovereign right can be expressed in whatever way we want to express it. Or we can use reason and create a state. And while we may grumble about the constraints it places on us, nonetheless it gives a more or less orderly environment in which to live. Okay, those are the two normal environments. But in reality, all of this is a mirage. I've mentioned before that Plato despaired of what you might call ordinary life. He saw it as ephemeral, and he called it a constant becoming. Nothing ever is, it's always moving forward, so nothing, if you want to look at an animal or something, by the time you look at it the next day or whatever, it's changed. Maybe it's contracted a disease, or maybe it's a little bit bigger or something. It's not the same as it was the day before. Everything is changing and becoming. Nothing is. And this is the same with our lives. We all try to cling on to some kind of permanence, but there is no permanence. We are a constant becoming and a process in actual fact. We're not a thing, we're a process. So I'm going to go to the way that Lao Tzu considered all of this, because I think it is the most powerful way to look at it all. This shit show that we call life on Earth, where we have to constrain our natural tendencies, otherwise we'd savage each other, is just a manifestation of existence, and it's a ever-changing one, and there's nothing permanent there. And to use the famous words from a song by Simple Minds, There's nothing out there worth fighting for, because it's always changing. There's nothing permanent. So you can go the other way. And the other way is to realize, as Lao Tzu did, that the 10,000 things are effectively straw dogs. He used the word straw dogs. Straw dogs are used in China in various various ceremonies. And after the ceremony, they'd be thrown onto a fire. Everything is used for a purpose, or just evolves, does what it does. So, mice are born and grow so that cats can torture them and play with them for half an hour, and so on and so forth. So I can go the other way, which is towards the Tao. The Tao is basically the force behind existence, if you like. It is silence, darkness, stillness. It is pregnant with power. Spinoza talks about this, Lao Tzu talks about it, and interestingly enough, I got an email from someone yesterday who was saying that whenever he's been to some kind of retreat, maybe in a monastery or somewhere like that, he finds that the silence is pregnant with power. It's not just nothing. There's a kind of power to it. And of course in life, we just piss that power away all the time. Nice new car, nice meal, nice sexually attractive partner, and so on, forever manifesting. If we can kind of rein that in, as Lao Tzu would say, to seal ourselves, then we can start to contemplate what is really the void, what is behind all of this, which is silence, darkness, stillness, and a kind of creative pregnancy that is wanting to manifest. Anyway, that would be as good as it gets. Normal life is essentially a shit show. We have to do our stuff. We're all driven by the survival instinct, and it's much more powerful and deeper than you think. But part of us, at least, can just say, well, yeah, okay, I've got to serve all of that, but actually part of me can at least enjoy some inner silence, some darkness, some stillness. And for 10 or 20 minutes a day at least, not be like a dog after a bone, after the next new treat, the next thing that's going to fascinate us or interest us, and essentially take away our power. In the Gurdjieff work, they say that the only thing that really matters is control over your attention, and actually that's largely right. There's a lot more I could say about this. I'll finish on one note, something that Spinoza said. He said, your pleasure or pain will depend on the quality of the thing that you love. If you love sexual conquest, then you will have the pleasures and pains associated with that. If you love money, the pleasures and pains associated with that, and so on and so forth. If you love silence, darkness, stillness, then you will have the pleasures associated with that. It's hard to imagine that there are any pains associated with that. Anyway, on that note, I'll finish.